The president lays out his plans to tackle the country's immigration problems.
You can come out of the shadows and get right with the law.
But executive action could set the stage for a political showdown.
We will not stand idle as the president undermines the rule of law in our country and places lives at risk.
The Vatican is bringing greater attention to autism. We speak with an American family in Rome meeting with the Pope. And residents in Ferguson, Missouri wait for a grand jury decision in the Michael Brown shooting. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Friday, November 21st, 2014. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. I'm Suzanne LaFranchi in for Brian Patrick, looking at your news now. President Obama travels to Las Vegas today, selling the controversial immigration reforms he laid out last night. Republicans have strongly been against the unilateral action. GOP leaders continued to voice that opposition today. The president said he was taking action because others in Washington were not.
To those members of Congress who question my authority to make our immigration system work better, or question the wisdom of me acting where Congress has failed, I have one answer. Pass a bill.
An estimated 11 million people are in the country illegally. The president's plan would allow about 5 million to stay by stopping the deportations of parents of children who were born or reside here, slowing down deportations for people in the country over a decade, expanding a 2012 order that protected those who came to the country illegally as minors, and stepping up deportations for serious criminals would be made a priority. Obama said welcoming the immigrants was in line with the country's history and values.
Are we a nation that tolerates the hypocrisy of a system where workers who pick our fruit and make our beds never have a chance to get right with the law? Or are we a nation that gives them a chance to make amends, take responsibility, and give their kids a better future?
The president also countered critics, saying his plan is not a blanket amnesty for illegal immigrants.
Amnesty is the immigration system we have today. Republicans
argued the president is overstepping his authority and not acting bipartisan.
With this action, he's refused to listen to the American people.
Speaker Boehner said the House will work to stop the president.
With this action, the president has chosen to deliberately sabotage any chance of enacting bipartisan reforms that he claims to seek. And as I told the president yesterday, he's damaging the presidency itself.
While Republicans debate how best to counter the president's actions, one senator has taken impeachment off the table. Jeff Sessions from Alabama told a group today that Congress will likely use its power of the purse to curtail the president's plans. The U.S. bishops welcomed the president's actions, citing the urgent pastoral need for a more humane view of immigrants. Archbishop Joseph Kurtz, president of the U.S. Bishops' Conference, also called for a legal process that respects each person's dignity, protects human rights, and upholds the rule of law. He quotes Pope Francis saying, "Every human being is a child of God." Archbishop Kurtz also said, "Migrants and refugees do not only represent a problem to be solved, but are brothers and sisters to be welcomed, respected, and loved." The Holy Father said the church is a source of hope for a similar group, migrants who often experience loneliness and distress as they seek a better life for their families. Pope Francis made his comments to participants in a Vatican meeting on taking spiritual care of people who cross borders to find work. He acknowledged some of the problems that come with migration. He highlighted the so-called brain drain, the affects young people who grow up without one or both parents, and risk of marriages failing due to prolonged absences. As we mentioned, the president's move will legally allow up to 5 million undocumented immigrants to stay in the U.S. temporarily. So far, his plan is getting mixed reaction from the families and friends of those migrants. Wyatt Goolsbee has more from the White House. Wyatt?
Yes, Suzanne, some undocumented immigrants say the president is taking a step in the right direction, which will help them to reunite with their friends and family. But others are criticizing him, saying that the president has waited too long to take up the issue of immigration reform. Gathered in the freezing cold, supporters of immigration reform rallied in front of the White House just before the president's speech. Many say his taking action is a step in the right direction.
Well, you know, we're very passionate about the subject, and this is a historical moment. I think the president's doing a great job with regards to taking these measures.
But his speech received a less enthusiastic response in parts of Los Angeles, where some say the president is not doing enough for undocumented immigrants who recently came to the U.S.
There will be a lot of workers, a lot of day laborers and community members who also deserve to be here, to stay in the country, because we contribute to the economy of this country.
Greg Chen with the American Immigration Lawyers Association says from a legal standpoint, the president's action will take some time to be implemented.
It'll be at least about 3 to 6 months before more people can apply for that. And the status they will have will be a temporary reprieve from enforcement. It's not legal status, and it means in the future that there will be some risk.
But Chen says it is a step in the right direction towards fixing a broken system.
Some of the announcements he made will help businesses that have employees that are waiting in backlogs. It will there's a number of things that he announced that will smooth that process. The details we're still waiting to see what it looks like exactly, but I think overall these changes will benefit all different sectors that are affected by the immigration system.
One other debate that's likely going to continue here in Washington is whether the president is really testing the limits of his presidential power. Both Republicans and Democrats agree that for more comprehensive immigration reform, it will all have to go through Congress. Suzanne?
Thank you, Wyatt. Manny Garcia is a spokesman for the Catholic Association of Latino Leaders. He's also the president of the family-owned business Lamar Tech Engineering and Construction Corporation. Now, your group's founder, Archbishop Gomez, said the president's plan does not go far enough. What, in your view, is specifically missing?
Well, I think what's missing is long-term solutions to the immigration problem. I think on the one hand, as Catholics, we applaud what we heard yesterday in the speech with regards to some action that will grant relief to the situation. But we know that it's not the long-term solution, which is something that the president shouldn't necessarily be doing, but Congress rather.
You know, you're an executive at a family-owned business. How does the business community view undocumented workers?
Well, first of all, we need to start from the premise that we believe as Catholics that no person should be exploited, right? So taking it from that vantage point, I think that corporate America is looking for a solution to the immigration problem. There's a lot of uncertainty revolving around this issue. And actually, you're going to find that most business owners want to see a long-term solution that will stabilize the situation with regards to a lot of the labor that gets done in this country.
You know, the president had control of both houses a couple of years ago. He could have put through some comprehensive immigration reform legislatively. Why do you think he did not do that?
I think that's a great question. In fact, I think as we all recall, this was one of the main issues of his campaign back in 2008. So we've been waiting a long time for this. As to why, I'm not quite sure. I do think that if you look back at the speech that his predecessor, George W. Bush, gave in 2006, which in fact the president highlighted yesterday, they're both saying pretty much exactly the same thing. So I think the problem isn't with the types of solutions that one might find for this very complicated problem. The problem is that we have a system where one party is just bent on making sure that the other party fails or isn't as effective as they could be. And so I think we need to get past this gridlock.
If the path is so divisive within the country and if a change could be made by a new president, how does that help solve the situation?
Well, I don't know that it's as divisive as we think it may be. Again, I think most of it has to do with political posturing and rhetoric. I do think that there are legitimate concerns with regards to some of the points that the president highlighted. Or any solution won't be a perfect solution. So I do think that there are some legitimate concerns. But I don't think that as a nation we're as divided as we think we are. I think more than anything what we're hearing from the GOP is their concerns that the president took executive action as opposed to having Congress resolve it, which they weren't, of course. But most of the pushback that we're getting isn't with the content, because again, it's almost identical to what President Bush was talking about in 2006. I think the biggest pushback is with the way he did it.
Well, it's 5 million versus far less as far as the presidents are concerned. What do you think a unique do Catholics have a unique perspective on this situation?
I think we do have a unique perspective because whereas the debate that we constantly hear about is what is our position with regards to immigration here in the United States, the Universal Church's position on migration, which is much more global, has been very constant and is founded, as you know, in the Gospels. And the church has been very consistent with regards to its message regarding migration. We're only looking at it from one perspective, from the immigration standpoint. But the church's position on migration is really specific, and it's very comprehensive, way more comprehensive than any executive action or any law on immigration that the government has ever passed.
Okay, thank you so much. Manny Garcia Tuñón, spokesman for the Catholic Association of Latino Leaders.
Thank you.
Now, some of the other stories our EWTN News nightly team has been covering in today's world. House Republicans sued the White House in federal court today on another hot-button issue, the president's health care law. The GOP lawmakers' suit argues the president overstepped his legal authority in carrying out the program. Republicans say the administration was unlawful when it delayed requirements that employers provide coverage to workers. The suit also says the federal government's payment of $175 billion to insurance companies was illegal. Congressional Democrats who voted against authorizing the suit say it is without merit. Now to Ferguson, Missouri, where people are awaiting the decision of a grand jury deciding whether to indict a white police officer who shot and killed a black teenager this summer. As Jason Calvi has more.
Protests turned violent this August in Ferguson, a suburb outside of St. Louis. Activists say Officer Darin Wilson used excessive force against 18-year-old Michael Brown after a confrontation with police.
There's a great amount of anxiety and worry and concern, and we're here to prayerfully introduce a spirit of calm, peace, unity, but continued pursuit for justice.
Pentecostal pastor Mike McBride is one of those urging peace tonight. The Archbishop of St. Louis has been circulating a similar message.
In God we are all one family, and we need to call upon Christ, the Prince of Peace, in prayer to give us the strength to sit down together as brothers and sisters.
Brown's father also speaks out in a new public service announcement.
Hurting others or destroying property is not the answer. No matter what the grand jury decides, I do not want my son's death to be in vain.
For weeks, police have been preparing for the grand jury's announcement. Missouri's governor has declared a state of emergency, and today, the Justice Department released new guidelines for police to help reduce conflicts. And while it's up to a 12-person grand jury, Pastor McBride says he knows what he wants.
Justice, we believe, is that Officer Darin Wilson will simply go to trial and have to face a jury and give an account for the incident that happened on that day.
And late today, we learned that city, police, and some protest leaders met several times. They agreed to many, but not all of the protesters' requests. And Susanna should add that a Catholic priest I talked to in Ferguson today tells me the community has really been coming together and been praying the rosary every single week for peace in Ferguson.
Okay, thank you so much, Jason. Pope Francis is adding South Africa's Cardinal Wilfred Fox Napier to the Synod on the Family Leadership Circle. Napier moderated one of the breakout groups at last month's Synod on the Family. He said the meeting was called to focus on the family, not contraception, abortion, or same-sex marriage. He comes from Durban, South Africa's largest port on the Indian Ocean. Church leaders will meet again in Rome next October for the 2015 Ordinary Synod on the Family. Coming up, the Pope highlights the spiritual needs of families with autistic children with a special audience this weekend. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm Susanna LaFranchi. Pope Francis will meet tomorrow with autistic children and their families. It's an exciting finish for an international conference on autism hosted by the Vatican's healthcare office this week. Autism is a complex disorder of brain development that makes social communication and relationship forming difficult. The conference this week brings more than 600 experts from 57 countries. One of their goals is to help reduce the stigma and isolation the condition often brings. In the U.S., about 1 in 68 children are diagnosed with autism, but the disorder is largely unknown elsewhere. One of the reasons the Vatican Healthcare Office gave for choosing autism as its conference focus. Ahead of the Pope's message, our Alan Holdren spoke with former NBC Universal CEO Bob Wright. With his wife, Bob co-founded the nonprofit called Autism Speaks. He shared their personal connection to the disorder with EWTN News Nightly.
Bob, how did you get into working with the autistic?
In 2004, my first grandson, Christian, was diagnosed with autism at Columbia University. It was a very, very difficult and shattering experience. In the end, there was no help for him. The hospital said you have to find speech therapy, occupational therapists, others. We don't really do that, and you're sort of on your own. That's how we first got into it. We traveled around the country, went to medical schools, university, hospitals, met with doctors and scientists, and they were almost blasé about this, saying it's very complicated, there's not enough focus on it, and we really can't help at this time.
And since then you've been on a campaign to raise awareness for people who have autism. What does it mean to you today now that there's a Vatican conference dedicated only to this theme?
Well, I should say that it is the most prevalent serious childhood developmental disorder in the world. That's the calling card. Having the Vatican here doing this at this time is very important. The Catholic Church represents hundreds of thousands of healthcare workers, and to have the imprimatur of this is something important is really a big deal, and I'm thrilled to be part of it, and we'll speak, and others have spoken. The needs are we need to have more ground up, and we need to have more top-down pressure from communities in both ways to really deal with this around the world.
And what are you hoping will come from the Pope's talk to you tomorrow?
The Pope has to, if the Pope would just say a few words, address the world in his incredible way he has touch and feel, and say to, I pray for people with autism and their families. Their families are very important. It's very important for you families to help these children and their adults, and I'll pray for you and the workers. That would open up doors all over the world, and shame and embarrassment that people have in some parts of the world would change in a minute.
Thanks so much, Bob.
Thank you.
Today marks the 50th anniversary of a Vatican document that revolutionized Catholic relations with other Christians. That was the 1964 Decree on Ecumenism, a landmark document of Vatican II. Pope Francis called the pursuit of Christian unity one of his principal daily concerns during a speech at the Vatican Thursday. He said the healing process that began in 1964 must penetrate even more deeply into church teaching and pastoral practice. He also mentioned the important role that ecumenical translations of the Bible have played in promoting cooperation among Christians. Western New York got 7 feet of snow these past 3 days. That's close to the typical snowfall for 1 year there. But as the sun comes out, so do concerns about flooding. Catherine Elliott reports.
The epic snowfall that buried the region this week is expected to stop today. Residents are still dealing with an extremely dangerous situation. Roofs are beginning to creak and collapse under the weight of 7 feet or more of snow. About 180 residents were evacuated from one assisted living facility.
There were 2 more deaths overnight. There were people from the Garden Gate nursing home who were evacuated, and they died during transport.
The storm is blamed for at least 10 deaths in western New York. Many roads remain impassable, and driving bans are in effect. Another concern is that temperatures are expected to rise quickly this weekend, possibly reaching 60 degrees by Monday. That would likely mean a lot of melting snow and potentially major floods.
It's hard to think we won't have flooding. The National Weather Service will be out today doing core samples to determine exactly how much water's in the snowpack.
The local conditions and the snow inside the Buffalo Bills Stadium forced the NFL to move Sunday's Bills game to Detroit. Catherine Elliott, EWTN News Nightly.
Up next, and religions come together in Rome for a conference to strengthen the traditional definition of marriage. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm Suzanne LaFranchi. A conference focusing on the distinct roles of men and women in the family wrapped up this week in Rome. Interreligious leaders from around the globe gathered together for what some are calling the most creative and imaginative Vatican conference ever. We're joined now by Caitlin Ruffa, the director of the Love and Fidelity Network from Rome. Thank you so much for joining us, Caitlin. You took part in that conference. What struck you the most about this meeting?
Well, thank you so much for having me, Suzanne. I think just, the bringing together of leaders from, I think it was 14 different faith communities that all, despite of their, theological differences, teach the same thing about marriage and the importance of marriage throughout history, and especially now, and especially for young people. And you could see, a real community, a real solidarity, as well as just a lot of energy coming out of this colloquium.
Can you tell us what the mission is of the Love and Fidelity Network, what your mission is for the group?
Absolutely. So we equip college students with the resources and arguments and support they need to be voices on their college campuses for marriage and the family and the integrity of human sexuality. So we have chapters on about 25 college campuses, mostly in the U.S. and one in Mexico as well. And it was a real treat for us actually to see one of our student leaders, our student fellows, as we call them, featured in a video that was displayed here at the Humanum Colloquium.
Isn't it a hard sell for young adults in the 21st century when it seems like society is moving away from traditional marriage?
You ask the million-dollar question. In some ways it's actually not, because young people, like everyone, crave lasting love. And the millennial generation is actually the generation that's been hurt the most by our divorce culture, by the breakdown of marriage and the family. And so, young adults, know that lasting love is hard to find. It takes work. But I think that they want it, more than ever, because they know just how important it is.
And in your opinion, how did Pope Francis influence this conference?
Well, his presence was fantastic. It really brought an energy to the conference. It brought a gravitas to the conference that wouldn't have been there otherwise. You could tell each of these leaders was really honored to be participating in a conference that Pope Francis, was himself the opening speaker to, and he set the exact tone. Speaking about the truth about what marriage is, reminding us that our moral ecology and the cultural framework that supports marriage and the family is crucial. But as always, he did it with compassion and love, and just set the conference off in exactly the right direction.
He certainly is a gift, and we so appreciate you for joining us. Caitlin LaRuffa, Love and Fidelity Network. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Van Gogh and Vermeer have captivated many art lovers, but there's more than meets the eye. Catherine Zeltner introduces us to a professor unlocking the mystery behind their paintings.
Picture a masterpiece, the beauty of a Vermeer, the emotion of a Van Gogh. But few see through them like Richard Johnson, a digital detective who finds hidden patterns beneath the brush strokes.
The technology advances continuously in terms of the images you can take of paintings.
The Cornell University professor uses X-rays and algorithms to uncover clues about when paintings and prints were made and if they're authentic.
We're not trying to displace the art historian, we're trying to extend their reach.
Johnson creates computer weave maps of the canvases to help tie paintings together.
Imagine that we cut it in half. This was painting 1 and this was painting 2. Then we can go and put them back together and find the ones that were on the same row, like that.
Johnson has helped art historians date and study paintings by Johann Vermeer and Diego Velázquez. More recently, he began analyzing the paper of Rembrandt prints. He works closely with art historians at major museums like the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York.
This new computer analysis of Rick Johnson is one more technical tool in the box of studying pictures,
providing a new perspective on old artworks. Catherine Zeltner, EWTN News Nightly.
Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and watch again on EWTN's YouTube page. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, I'm Suzanne LaFranchi. Thanks for watching tonight. We leave you tonight with the images of the new saints Pope Francis will canonize this Sunday in Rome. Good night and God bless.